Good evening, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to Black News Tonight. I'm Shannon LaNier in for Mark Lamont Hill. Well, it looks like jobless claims rise once again. The Labor Department reporting 362,000 new claims this week alone. Economists were expecting at least 335,000 new filings. The rise in claims coming mostly from California. This week's claims is the highest it's been since the beginning of August. The rise shows that hiring may slow due to concerns about the pandemic heading into the fall season. Now, this is especially bad timing considering some unemployment benefits are coming to a close. Well, a black woman in Virginia Beach is speaking out against her neighbors who she says that they've been playing loud music, get this, monkey sounds and comedy skits with racial slurs whenever she and her family are at home. Now, some are comparing this to a scene out of the movie or the show Lovecraft Country, and Janique Martinez posted video on her Facebook page, and in it you can hear the music and noises playing in the background. Martinez says that her family first noticed the behavior when they saw blinking lights as they were like sensors whenever they left their home. Now, the lights would blink and then you would hear the noises, and she and her family moved into the neighborhood about 5 years ago, and they've dealt with these antics from their neighbor much of that time. Well, Martinez has called the police, but unfortunately they told her that nothing can be done since no crime has been committed, not yet at least. And she's also tried to file a civil complaint in court. Also, no results. Well, new legislation from a Virginia congressman would make teaching critical race theory in federal funded schools a civil rights violation. Representative Bob Good introduced the Protecting Students Civil Rights Act Wednesday. According to Good, CRT judges students by their face, saying that their face determines their future. And he says that he's hoping to advance Martin Luther King Jr.'s principles by judging people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. According to Good's office, over 5,000 educators have pleaded and pledged to teach CRT in their schools. Well, joining me now to talk about all of this is Yohuru Williams, an education activist and founding director of the Racial Justice Initiative. Welcome back to Black News Tonight.
Good to see you, Shannon.
You as always. So we got to dive into a few of these topics because there's a lot of challenges coming forth for CRT. This one wants to make it a civil rights violation. Is this even plausible?
Not only is it not plausible, it's intellectually dishonest. This clearly is not what was mandated by the Biden administration in terms of the Secretary of Education. It's the other CRT, culturally responsive teaching. This hullabaloo over critical race theory has been blown up by conservatives in a way, conservative Republicans in a way, to manufacture a problem that doesn't exist. It's not taught in K-12 education, and this legislation is ridiculous. It really, I think, pollutes the legacy of the work of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King by using his words and twisting his words in a way to support something or to take away from something he actually would have supported, and that is culturally responsive teaching that elevates young children of color, particularly African-American students, who often don't see themselves in the curriculum.
And you're right. I can't believe Representative Bob Good actually had the audacity to quote Martin Luther King when bringing this legislation forward. And he even said, you know, that he's trying to use these words and twist them around. And we all know that Dr. King's daughter, Bernice King, she's actually criticized several other lawmakers for this same type of thing. So where is the disconnect? Why are they not understanding the difference in the way Martin Luther King Jr. used it and the way they're trying to use it?
It's a great question, Shannon. I think there's a long history of this in the United States by white supremacists, and I will be very clear in using that language. We saw in the aftermath of the Civil War, you had black codes that were enacted, which were called Civil Rights Acts, acts to confer civil rights on freedmen and for other purposes. And this is very similar. It's actually a denial of the opportunity for teachers to explore the rich history of the United States with regard to the contributions of people of color, specifically African Americans. And they're dressing it up as civil rights legislation to protect and to promote this idea of equality, which is a fabrication on their part. Where was Representative Good when Virginia families were asking for culturally responsive teaching? Where was he when there were conversations about how to deal with the criminal justice system and the lack of representation in the curriculum? So these are, to me, clear indicators that this is not motivated by any sense of the need for civil rights or equity or justice in the state of Virginia or in the United States. This is just white supremacy by another name.
Okay, so help us out with this. What can actually be done to help protect the future of CRT? Because to me, it just seems to be telling the truth of what actually happened in history and not sugarcoating it or sanitizing it.
Well, we have some protections in place already that we just need to shore up and make sure that they are going to be observed. Ensuring that teachers have a right in the classroom to really challenge students. And so teacher tenure, particularly when we're talking about the university level, but also in K-12, this idea that, it's teachers' responsibility to really be able to engage students to a degree and help them develop critical thinking skills. So we have to support our teachers. We have to support teaching organizations that are fighting for the rights for teachers to be able to express themselves unencumbered by this type of legislation in the classroom. Secondly, we need to get out and demand, as many parents have done, African-American parents across the country, that we not fall for the bait and switch here in terms of the rhetoric of people like Bob Good, but the reality of this being about culturally responsive teaching. For too long, students of color, African-American students, have not been present in the curriculum. And so the idea that in this moment when we're saying, look, we need to teach the full range of American history, which includes the contributions of African Americans and the dark chapters of our history, that's actually nothing that we should fear. It's something we should celebrate, and it actually will deepen American democracy. It's ironic that Good and others are taking aim at this when in fact this is the extension, the logical extension of how to deepen American democracy.
I agree with you so much, but I also think it needs to extend beyond that black community to other communities because they need to learn the history and the stories more than we do in many of these cases and our contributions to this country. But we have to move on and talk about this Virginia Beach woman who says that her neighbors are actually playing monkey sounds out loud whenever they walk out of the house. I mean, how crazy is that?
Very surprising and yet not surprising. In the aftermath of January 6th and the aftermath of the year that we've seen where you've got this kind of culture where racism and white supremacy are celebrated in these spaces, the fact that these are two veterans, the fact that they've lived in this community for 5 years, the fact that they have young children and that their children are now growing up being exposed to this type of behavior, and the answer that's coming from the local police is that they're impotent to stop it, is problematic for me. I look at this situation as another indication of how much more work needs to be done to really get to a point of what Representative Good and others are saying we don't need, but in fact, this is a clear indication that America has a deep racial problem. It's anti-black, it's white supremacist, and this is a good example of it. The fact that this family doesn't have protections, the fact that veterans aren't up in arms, that two veterans would be treated in this way, to me is deeply problematic and indicative of a much larger issue here.
Well, before you go, real quick, is there any recourse that this family has? Anything they can do? They've tried the court, they tried the police. What now?
What I'd love to see is some politician, they love to jump into controversies like this, draft a law that would criminalize this behavior. I'm not one for criminalizing these types of behaviors, but at the same time, if this is really what you care about, step up and put some laws on the books that prevent families from having to deal with this, particularly in this case, families with young children who've served this country, given their blood, and now you're saying, we're impotent to protect you from this type of harassment. Unacceptable.
Unacceptable indeed. Yohuru, thank you so much for joining us as always. And be sure to join the conversation because we want to hear from you. Head over to our BNC Instagram and Twitter pages and let us know how you feel. Also visit our website, bnc.tv, and subscribe to our YouTube page to check out clips from the show.